Hello friends, it's Kristie Marcotte. Today I'm sharing cards I made using Love From Lizi's September 2019 Super Kit. She is celebrating 3 years of bringing us amazing crafty goodies. She put together a super kit as a way of saying thank you, and this kit is just stunning. It's full of exclusive Love From Lizi products that value at over $100. It is a monthly kit though, so once it sells out, it's gone. I really enjoyed all of the lovely floral designs with just those hints of autumn colors in there. So let's go ahead and get started with card number 1. The kit includes 20 sheets of 6x6 single-sided pattern paper, and I love all of these watercolor and real muted designs. They work great for backgrounds. And just to add a little extra sparkle to this design, I'm just using some of the clear gold mirror peel-offs. I'm just using I believe this is the thinnest width, going all the way around the card right at the very edge. And I am going just a little bit over the edge, about a ½ inch, and then I'm just going to take a craft knife and push it into that corner just to give it a nice clean edge, and then I'll just remove those little cut-off pieces. Next, I'll just add some ATG to the back of this paper, and you can't really tell in the video, but this paper has a pearlescent finish. 5 of the pattern papers all have that lovely finish to them. I just adhered it to some of the cardstock that's included in the kit, put that on my card base. And overall, this card's gonna be very simple. Lizi makes it so easy to make cards with this kit. There are, I think, 11 of these frames included, and then also a huge stack of ephemera. So I chose one of the larger pieces, has these beautiful floral designs in the corners, just adhered that onto my card using some liquid adhesive, and then using one of the sentiment dies that's included in the kit, I cut it out of this beautiful specialty cardstock. It's kind of a pinkish color. It's a mirror paper, so it has a lovely shine to it. And then I'm just going to attach that using some more liquid adhesive. And for this piece, I'm going to use some of the Nuvo glue pen. This was included, I believe, in last month's kit. It's great for those really fine details. I'll just use my tweezers to hold those tiny little pieces, and I'm trying to make sure I get it nice and straight on my card. This sentiment is warm thanks, which is actually the theme of the whole kit. But even with all of the grateful sentiments that are included in this kit, I think the papers will still work great for other card themes as well. And now for a finishing touch, I'm going to use some of the sequins that are included in the kit. I'll just put 3 of them in that lower left-hand corner and then 2 of them in that upper right-hand corner. This is a lovely sequin mix, lots of different sizes of gold, and it has sort of a pinkish purple floral sequin in there as well. So it's really pretty. So I am trying to make a few more of my cards on the flatter side. Since I donate so many cards to local charities, I do want to make sure to have some that aren't really thick with embellishments because they do mail them out. So now moving on to card number 2. I'm using some of this yellow cardstock. This is included in the kit, and then also some of the gold pearlescent specialty paper, which is one of the add-ons. And I always love the specialty cardstock bundles that are part of the add-ons. And these sell out really quickly, so if you're ever interested in them, you need to buy them right away. So just to add a little bit of detail to the background of this cardstock, I'm using the large floral stamp and just using some yellow ink. So this gives it just a really subtle pattern. So I'm just stamping it over and over, going on top of them. It doesn't have to be perfect. Sometimes I don't get a really clean stamp, but it still works out and just gives that hint of the floral design. And then just to add a little more sparkle to this card, I'm going to use some of the gold glitter sway peel-offs. This is the medium size, and once again, I'm just putting them right on the very edge of that cardstock. And then I'm cutting them the same as I did on the previous card, just going with my craft knife in the corner just to get that nice clean edge, almost like a frame. And you can see I have a bunch of ink on the back of this piece. I was trying several different ink colors for that floral design in the background, and then I finally decided just to stick with that real subtle yellow. And then I'm layering this whole piece on some more of that gold pearlescent paper, and then I'll go ahead and add it to my card base. And then next I pulled out some of the watercolor paper that's included in the kit, and I'm going to stamp that same floral stamp onto this paper. And then the kit also includes a little sampler palette of all these different paints. So first I'm going to go ahead and wet each of them so I can see what the colors actually are. And these are really fun if you just want to try out some watercolors and you don't want to really invest in like a full tube of them. So for the flower, I decided I'm going to paint all of it in that red color. And I am not an expert at watercoloring at all, so I'm definitely just kind of adding a little bit more water, a little bit more paint, going back and forth. And I think I ended up getting this just a little too wet, but the watercolor papers are really good quality, so it didn't ever fall apart or tear at all. And even though I don't watercolor very often, my friend Sandy still recommended I get a really good brush. So I'm using the Silver Black Velvet 3/4 inch oval brush. And I felt like it still needed just a little something extra, so I just spritzed it with some gold shimmer spray. And then I set that aside, let that dry, and then I wanted to do some leaves as well. Now for this, I decided to try one of the little water brushes. So I'm just using the same concept. I dipped the brush into the paint, squeezed that brush and add a little bit of water, and then did 2 sets of the leaves. So I'm letting both of those dry. I'm gonna go ahead and add a sentiment on the card, and this one is Just a Note. It is part of the add-on stamp set Smudges and Sentiments. So I'm just using my Mini Misty to make sure I get a nice, good stamped impression. And now I'm going to go ahead and assemble my flower with the leaves. So I'm just laying them out to make sure I have the placement where I want them. And then I'll just use some liquid adhesive to adhere the leaves. And the kit does include coordinating dies to go with the main stamp set that comes in the kit. So that's a really nice thing. And then I decided I wanted to pop up the flower, but I'm just using some real thin dimensional foam squares. So go ahead and remove the little backers on that and then place my flower on the card. And then just one finishing touch, I'm using some of the glitter drops that are included in the kit. And I decided just to stick with 2. I was going to put some more by the sentiment, but I thought the 2 was enough. So there is my finished card. So now moving on to card number 3. I'm going to use a card sketch this time for inspiration. This is Mojo Monday sketch number 521. So I have this lovely brown pattern paper that has pink flowers all around. It matches the stamp set really nicely. And then I'm layering that on some of the specialty cardstock. It's like this soft pink satin mirror paper, really pretty. And then I'm just using a small piece of this pink and white striped paper that has a pearlescent finish on it. It's always nice to combine a few different pattern papers together, but you always want to make sure you don't have too many busy papers together because they do tend to compete with one another. And then for that banner strip going across the card, I'm just using some more of this mirror cardstock. I'll go ahead and adhere that card front onto a card base. And then next I'm going to add a sentiment on a stitched circle die cut. And I am pulling out my Mini Misty to do the stamping just because I want to make sure to get a nice solid impression. I only have a couple inks that I trust that I can just stamp it once and not have to worry about re-inking it again. But I really like this brown color, so I knew I'd have to re-ink it at least one more time. So I just use the piece of paper where I cut out that circle. It just helps line everything up in the Mini Misty. And then I layered that circle die cut on a scallop circle die cut. Again, layering all of this in some more of that really pretty mirror paper. And I'm just gonna pop up that sentiment circle using some foam dimensional tape. And then just finishing touch, I'm gonna use some more of the little glitter drops. But I felt like I needed something extra in that lower edge by the sentiment. So I used a flower die from a previous Love From Lizi kit, and I actually cut it out of the front piece of the 6x6 paper. That little front cover that has all the samples. I liked that this purple, kind of a pinkish purple color was on that front, and it was perfect to just cut out these really small little flowers. And then I'll just add a couple more of these little glitter dots to the inside of the flowers. It's always fun to add some glitter to your card without worrying about it making a mess. And these glitter dots are just beautiful. So there is my finished card, and that's card number 3. So now moving on to card number 4. Again, I'm going to use a sketch, and this is MFT sketch number 449. And if you're ever interested in any of the sketches that I share, including the measurements, I do have all of that information listed on my coordinating blog post, and that link is in the description below. Now for this sketch, I have it listed to put a 4.5-inch circle cut in half. Now I realize that isn't really a half circle or semicircle. It's more of a dome shape. So whatever works best for you. I happen to have this dome shaped die that works perfectly. But if you don't have this exact die, you can definitely modify this sketch to make it work best for you. Sketches really are just kind of a starting inspiration point, and you can change them as you go. I'm always changing the sketches, and I tend to not follow the measurements that I actually list. So for this card, I wanted to add some of the ribbon that's in the kit. I just have that single piece going down the lower portion of the card, and I just cut it a little bit wider than the width of the card, tucked the ends behind, and adhered those in place using a small piece of score tape. And now I'm going to go ahead and heat emboss a sentiment. So I'm using the Warm Thanks sentiment, treated that paper first with some anti-static powder, and then I'm using some Versamark ink. And then the kit includes this beautiful embossing powder. This is the perfect plum color, and it coordinates beautifully with the cardstock and the papers in the kit. So I'm going to go ahead and get my heat gun so I can set this. And sometimes it's hard to see in the video, but it has a really lovely glossy look to it. So once I have that set, and I'll let that cool for a minute, I'm going to cut just some fishtails on the end. So I have a little banner for my sentiment. Layer that on some more of this cardstock. And since that left-hand side hangs off, it kind of goes over where all those layers are, I didn't want it to sag on the card, so I did add just some thin foam squares. And then I'm using a couple of the ephemera pieces. So before I place that sentiment, I want to make sure it's going to be not overlapping any of the ephemera. And I did have to trim some of that sentiment banner down just slightly so it wasn't touching the ephemera. So once I have that in place, I'm going to go ahead and use some more of that thin foam dimension tape for the ephemera pieces as well. And these are just beautiful. They have lots of flowers, kind of some berries in there, and some fall leaves. I love the colors in this kit. And then just a finishing touch, I'm going to use some Nuvo drops. And this is the Auburn Pearl color. It's a really lovely fall color. So I'm putting 3 drops in that upper left-hand corner. And I always take a chance whether I'm going to get those nice and even. I think I got them fairly straight this time. And I'll just put some really tiny ones kind of in the center of the flowers and around the leaves. So I love how this card turned out. So there is my finished card, and this is card number 4. Now moving on to card number 5. I'm not going to use a card sketch this time, but I do have an assortment of stitch dies. So the background, I have a stitched rectangle die, and then I have a larger banner die and then two smaller banner dies. So I'm just kind of laying them out on my card. I'm going to have that larger banner on top, and then the smaller ones are going to be underneath, kind of overlapping. And I do have them hanging off that left side of the card, but I will be trimming all of that off. So I find it easier to flip it upside down and then trim it that direction. And now I'm going to stamp an image on a stitched circle die cut. So using this berries, I guess this is, the stamp from the kit, and I'm going to do some heat embossing again. So first I want to make sure I get it centered nicely on this circle die cut. I'll use my anti-static powder, some Versamark ink, and I'm going to use the same embossing powder that's included in the kit. This is the Perfect Plum color. And I love the contrast with this embossing powder compared to this pattern paper. Most of the pattern papers have a lighter color with that really nice watercolor background. So once I get this heat set, I'm going to adhere that onto some specialty cardstock. And this is that pink satin mirror paper again. Used a scallop die. And then this circle is going to hang just slightly off on the left-hand side. So I'll adhere it onto the card first, and then again I'll flip that card front upside down and then just trim off the edge so it's nice and flush on that left-hand side. And then I'll adhere this panel onto this cardstock, and hard to tell, it's reflecting so much from my overhead lights, but this is some more of that specialty cardstock. And I'm just going to go ahead and stamp the sentiment right onto the card. And I know I do take a chance. I just kind of hold my breath and hope that I don't mess it up. But this is one of those inks that works really nicely, and I rarely ever misstamp with it. And for this card, I did decide to leave just that thin outline of the card base. So just that 1/8 of an inch of the white card base showing. And then just a finishing touch, I'm going to use some more of the glitter drops, this time in the pink. So there is my finished card, and this is card number 5. So now moving on to card number 6. I'm using some of the specialty paper that's included in the kit. It's this beautiful burgundy vellum paper with all of this gold foil on it. And I'm layering that onto some of the gold pearlescent paper. And of course I didn't get it quite straight, so I did have to pull it up and adhere it in place again. One thing that's really nice about this vellum, it's such a dark color that you can put the adhesive underneath and you really can't see it. That's usually the problem with vellum, is it's always trying to figure out what kind of adhesive to use so you can't see it. So on the bottom part of the card, I'm going to add some of this, it looks like a gold ribbon. It's a satin ribbon that comes in the kit. I just put some pieces of score tape down first and then did 2 strips of this ribbon. And then I'll flip that end around the back of that card front and then just adhere it in place using some score tape again. And just to add a little more shine, I know this card already has a ton of shine, but you can always have a little extra, right? I'm going to use some more of the peel-offs, and this is the thinnest width of the clear gold mirror. I'm not sure if that's actually the right name. I always get that one confused, but it's one of my favorite peel-offs. I tend to use them all the time. So I'm just putting 1 strip on each of the outside edges of the ribbon, and then I'll just tuck the ends behind. And I hadn't actually put that score tape down before, but I am now. Make sure to get all of the ribbon and the peel-off ends sealed down in place so they don't pop up later. Then I'll adhere that card front onto a card base. And then next I'm going to stamp a sentiment, and most of my cards are going to be thank you cards. It's just that time of year and it's perfect to have extra thank you cards on hand. So this is one of the stamps that's included in the kit. This is Many Thanks. I'm stamping it on some white cardstock, and I felt it was too white. So I'm using some more of that gold shimmer spray and just spritz that oval. Felt like I needed just one more little spritz. Went and let that dry. And then I'll layer that on some burgundy cardstock on a scalloped oval. And then I'll just pop that up using some foam dimensional tape. I love how simple this card is, but it has so much going on with all of that beautiful gold shine. And then a few finishing touches. I'm going to add a couple small banners in that upper right-hand corner. I have one a little wider with that burgundy cardstock and then a very narrow banner with the gold pearlescent paper. So I just offset them slightly, adhered both of them using some liquid adhesive. And then pulled out some more of those glitter dots. Absolutely love these. These colors are great. Put a few of them in the centers of the flowers and then 2 of them on those banners. So there is my finished card, and this is one of my favorites from the kit. But do let me know which card is your favorite. So now moving on to card number 7. I have some blue cardstock and then also some kind of a rust color pearlescent paper. And then I pulled out the copper mirror bubble peel-offs. But instead of using that bubble strip, I'm actually using the little diamond piece that goes right in between those little circle strips. I'm going to put one piece kind of slightly to the inside edge all around the card. And I'll let that one side overhang just slightly, and then I'll just tuck it, kind of wrap it around to the back of the card. I'll do the same on the top and the bottom. It adds just a beautiful shine, and it matches this pearlescent paper really nicely. The bubble design peel-offs are really fun because they have 3 uses. It has this diamond strip, obviously the bubble strip, and then also has those inside circles. So you kind of get a 3-in-1 when you purchase that sheet. So now I'll go ahead and put this blue piece of cardstock right inside. And then this is a brand new item from Lizi. It is the Background Builder die set, and it's set number 1. So there are going to be future sets. These are great just to have in your stash. It helps create cards without using sketches because you can mix and match the pieces and come up with your own designs, which is really fun. So I used one of the pattern papers to cut that thin sentiment strip and then also this rectangle. And then I used the square to cut another one of the pattern papers. So it has a slightly darker color. I didn't want it to stand out too much, so it's kind of like a tone on top of that cream color. So first I'll go ahead and adhere my card front onto my card base. And then I'm going to lay out these 4 squares. Just trying to make sure to put them fairly even before I start adhering any of them in place. Starting in September, Love From Lizi's blog is going to have some challenges that will use these background builder dies. So you definitely want to check that out. And I do have that link listed in the description box below. Now the layout that I have here is very similar to some sketches that I've used in the past. It's just a really good design. So I'm using some more of this pearlescent paper, and I cut out this stitch circle die, and this die is also part of that background builder set. I'm using one of the ephemera pieces, and I'm just going to pop it up slightly using some more of those thin foam squares. And then I'm going to add a couple of those banners in the upper left-hand corner. And this is not a die that's included in the background builder set. It's just a die that I use all the time. I'll adhere those in place using some score tape. Again, 2 different colors. I like to offset them slightly. And then just a finishing touch, I'm going to add 2 drops of the Nuvo crystal drops right on each side of the sentiment. And there is my finished card. I absolutely love the colors on this card, and fall cards are always my favorite to make. So now moving on to card number 8. This is a sketch from MFT number 247. I'm using another one of the add-on stamp sets. This is the frame set. So there are 2 add-on stamp sets this month, which is really fun. And this set is so cool. All of these pieces are actually individual. So instead of the, what's that, 7 or 8 stamps it looks like, there's actually 19. So all of those frames come out. But instead of using them as a frame, I decided to use just an assortment of the sizes, and I'm going to stamp a background. So first I treated the whole pattern paper with some anti-static powder, and then I'm stamping all of them using some Versamark ink. So I'm just layering them on top of each other. They're going over the edge of the page. I'm just trying to get a nice pattern all over. And then I'm using the Copper Rose Embossing Powder, and this is by Love From Lizi. It's one of my favorite colors. It's so beautiful. So once I get some of those loose pieces of powder wiped off, I'm going to go ahead and heat set that with my heat gun. And you can kind of see that really lovely shine coming through. And this color matches just perfectly with some of the specialty mirror cardstock, and that's what I will be using on this card as well. So there you can really see that shine. So I used that specialty cardstock and cut out this stitched rectangle frame. And I'm going to adhere that onto that pattern paper. And since there is some embossing powder, I want to make sure it all stays in place. So I'm adhering it using some score tape. Just pull off the backing on all of that and try to get it nice and even on this piece. I think overall I got it fairly straight. And then I'll go ahead and adhere that panel onto a card base. I use a lot of adhesive since I did all of that heat embossing. It tends to warp the paper just slightly. Then I'm going to add a sentiment across the lower portion of the card, and I used another one of the sentiment dies that's included in the kit, and this is the Warm Thanks. I felt like using white cardstock behind the sentiment was just going to be way too bright, so I'm just using a small scrap of some of the tone-on-tone pattern paper. And then I cut out this sentiment using some more of that rust color pearlescent paper. I'll just use some glue to adhere that in place. And the word warm is in 2 pieces. So the W is one piece and then the rest of the word is another piece. So it always helps to lay out all of those letters first and then start gluing them in place. And so I am still trying to make fairly flat cards. I know some of my previous cards I did use some foam dimension that I'm remembering, no, these need to be flat. So on this piece, everything is going to stay nice and flat. So I'm just adhering that whole piece on with some score tape and then using some more of this rust colored pearlescent paper. I'm just going to cut that banner for that upper right hand corner and again adhere it with some score tape. I felt like that was plenty for this card. It's already super shiny. So there is my finished card, and this is card number 8. So now moving on to card number 9. Now this card is definitely not my normal style, but the stamp sets have these really fun brush strokes. There's quite a few different ones, especially if you pick up that add-on stamp set, you'll have another assortment. So I'm just using this larger piece. So I stamped it in the center of the card using some purple ink, kind of a light purple, and then I rotated that stamp, so it's still the same stamp. I'm going to put it right above that first strip using a darker purple color. And I do have to ink it up a couple of times. And then keeping it that same direction, I'm going to lay it below that light purple strip. So I'm going to end up with these 3 strips of ink going across the card. So it's just going to look like I used a watercolor brush and painted them right onto that background. So next I'm going to stamp one of the images. So first I'm going to treat the paper using some anti-static powder. Got some Versamark ink. I'm going to ink that up a couple of times. And one thing I noted, I should have let that colored ink dry just a little bit longer because I did end up with just some extra of the white embossing powder. So I'm just brushing that away using a dry paintbrush. And I couldn't get into all of those really tight little nooks and crannies there, but I think the image still looked really good because it had this nice kind of almost a paint splatter look to it. So I'm going to go ahead and heat set that. And this is the Very Vanilla Embossing Powder by Love From Lizi. So I'm not using any pattern paper at all on this card. This is just white cardstock. But of course, they need some shine, so I'm going to use the peel-offs. These are included in the kit. It's kind of a light purple, slightly pink color. I'm just going to take the middle, this is the middle width strip, and I'm just going slightly on the inside edge. And then I'll just wrap that little extra bit of the peel-off around the back of that card panel, just creating a frame around this lovely image. This is a beautiful color. So go ahead and tuck all of those little ends, and then I'll add some ATG. And this panel is slightly smaller than an A2 size card. That way there'll be a little bit of the white card base showing. And I was getting ready to adhere that panel onto the card base, and then I decided to add some twine just to that lower portion of the card. Wrapped it around twice, and I'm going to adhere those ends to the back using some score tape. You can see I have a lot of ATG on the back of this card panel. Just want to make sure it stays in place on the card. And then I'll just thread set that little extra piece of the twine underneath. So I will be tying a bow later. I couldn't decide where I wanted it quite yet. Now for the sentiment, I'm going to use another one of these little paint strokes using that light color purple again. And then I'm going to stamp a sentiment right on top of that brush stroke. And I did remove it real quick to heat set it, just so I made sure I wasn't going to bleed any of this ink. So I'm using that Warm Thanks again, and I realized later when I finished all my cards, I used the Warm Thanks at least 4 times on my cards. But that's okay, since it's a great sentiment to have. And then using the coordinating dies that come in the kit, I'm just going to align that up using some washi tape, and then I cut it out. And it did cut off just a little bit of that W and the S, but I think it still looked just fine. I'm going to pop up that sentiment strip using some of those thin foam squares, putting it just slightly off center. And then I'm going to add that bow just right below the sentiment. I'm just not the best at tying bows all the time, so I do fuss with them quite a bit. Then I felt like the card needed just something in that upper right hand corner. I was going to try some of those glitter dots again, but instead I switched to some more Nuvo crystal drops. And this is the Sweet Lilac color. So I put 3 of them in that upper right hand corner, and then decided to add just a few more sprinkled around the card. So there is my finished card, and I just love how this one turned out, even with not a drop of pattern paper. So now moving on to card number 10. I'm using a sketch from Operation Ride Home. This is number 80. I selected 2 different pattern papers and then also some more of the specialty mirror cardstock. And instead of this strip that goes on the left-hand side of this smaller rectangle in the sketch, I'm going to use peel-offs instead. So I'm using those copper mirror bubble peel-offs. I used 1 strip of the widest bubble peel-off. Put that one down first, and then I'm using those little diamond pieces on both sides of that little circle piece. Give it just a little different design. I always have the ends cut just a little bit longer, and then I'll just tuck those behind, add some ATG, and layer that on this specialty cardstock. I always love this specialty cardstock. It has such a beautiful shine to it. So same with this background paper, I'm just going to layer that onto some of this mirror cardstock. And for those who are wondering, most of my matted layers are an additional 1/8 of an inch on top of the measurements listed on the sketch. So go ahead and put my card front onto a card base. And now for the sentiment, I cut out some more of this pattern paper just with a small rectangle, and I'm using a previous Love From Lizi stamp set. This was from last year's October kit. This is the Hello Autumn set, and it is still available if you are interested. Always love the fall sets. So again, I'm going to layer this on some more of this specialty cardstock. And before I adhere that in place, I'm going to use one of the stickers that's included in the kit. There are 3 sheets of these beautiful letter stickers with flowers and leaves all around them. So I'm just using the A for autumn. So I'll go ahead and pop up this little sentiment using some foam dimensional tape. And I figured those leaves needed just a little bit of color, so I'm just using a Copic marker and coloring those in real quick. And then I'm going to add a small little banner in that upper right-hand corner using some more of the specialty cardstock. And then just one finishing touch, I'm going to use some more of the Nuvo drops. I tried the glitter drops again, but I didn't think they matched quite right. So I'm just using some more of that auburn pearl color. And one of the Nuvo drops left kind of a little tail, so I'm just using a scrap piece of paper to wipe that away. So there is my finished card, and this is card number 10. So now here's just a quick recap of the cards I made using Love From Lizi's September 2019 Super Card Kit. This is a beautiful card kit and a really great value because there is so much included in this kit. Lots of things that you'll be able to use forever or at least a long time. I have included a link in the description box for the kit along with the other products that I used. So now here is everything that I have left over from the kit. I still have one full sheet of cardstock, quite a few scraps, a little bit more of this vellum specialty paper and some of that watercolor paper, lots of the pattern paper scraps, and then I think I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 full sheets of the 6x6 paper. Most of those frames are still left, tons of the ephemera. You get a lot in this kit. There are those paint palettes, lots of the ribbon. I have quite a few of those glitter dots, peel off stickers. I only used a few of those. I have quite a bit of the sequin mix still left, and then all of the letter stickers except for one of the A's. There are the sentiment dies, and then of course the stamps and the coordinating dies. And then I also have the jar of embossing powder. Forgot to show that. So that is still left over from the kit. As I'm recording this voiceover, this kit is still available, but I will post an update when the kit does sell out because it will sell out. They do every month. So links are included in the description box if you are interested. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.